There are moments in life when you believe you've already survived the worst pain imaginable. Then fate quietly proves you wrong. I thought losing my mother would be the hardest day of my life. I had no idea something far more unforgivable was waiting for me just around the corner. Not a stranger, not an enemy, my own wife. By the time I understood what she had done, one goodbye had already been stolen from me forever. My name is Malik Tyrone. I'm 40 years old, and for most people in Atlanta, my name is attached to highways, bridges, and traffic systems they use every day without ever realizing it. 15 years ago, I founded Tyrone Infrastructure Solutions, a company specializing in intelligent transportation infrastructure. We designed structural monitoring systems that detected weaknesses inside aging bridges long before they became dangerous. We installed smart traffic management networks that reduced congestion in growing cities. We built highway safety technology capable of identifying hazardous road conditions in real time before accidents occurred. Governments hired us. Engineering firms partnered with us. Major transportation departments across the Southeast depended on our technology every single day. People assumed I became successful because I was brilliant. The truth was much simpler. Someone believed in me before anyone else ever did. My mother. Everything I became started with her sacrifices. She raised me alone in Southwest Atlanta after my father died when I was still a little boy. She worked double shifts cleaning office buildings downtown. Some mornings she came home after sunrise, changed clothes, packed my lunch, and walked me to school before going back to another job. I didn't understand how exhausted she was until I became an adult. As a child, I only knew one thing. Whenever I looked into the crowd during school events, she was always there. She never missed a science fair, never missed a basketball game, never forgot my birthday. She celebrated every tiny victory as though I had just conquered the world. When I was 16, I told her I wanted to become an engineer. Not because I loved math, because I wanted to build things that lasted longer than people. She smiled, then disappeared into her bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a small metal box. Inside were envelopes filled with cash. Mostly 20s, some 10s, a few crumpled $5 bills. She had spent nearly 12 years secretly saving every extra dollar she could. It wasn't enough to pay for college, not even close. But it represented something far greater. Hope. She looked me straight in the eyes. Money comes back, she said. Opportunities don't. That sentence became the foundation of my entire life. Years later, while studying civil engineering at Georgia Tech, there were nights I wanted to quit. Classes were overwhelming. Bills kept arriving. Internships barely paid enough to survive. Whenever I called home ready to give up, she somehow always knew exactly what to say. Bridges don't collapse because of one crack, Malik. They collapse because people ignore the first crack. Keep fixing one problem at a time. I never forgot those words. After graduation, I rented a small warehouse outside Atlanta with stained concrete floors, leaking pipes, and second-hand office furniture purchased from companies going out of business. That warehouse became the birthplace of Tyrone Infrastructure Solutions. During the day, I met clients. At night, I wrote software, tested monitoring sensors, answered customer emails, swept the warehouse floor, and packed shipping crates myself. Some nights, I slept on an old folding cot because driving home wasted precious time. When our first contract finally came through, I drove straight to my mother's apartment. She opened the front door before I could even knock. She looked at my face, then smiled. You got it. I hadn't said a single word. She simply knew. We celebrated with fried chicken from the neighborhood restaurant we'd visited since I was 12 years old. No expensive champagne. No luxury dinner, just laughter. She looked happier than I did. As the company expanded, people constantly asked why I never moved headquarters to New York, Dallas, or Silicon Valley. My answer never changed. Atlanta raised me. Atlanta believed in me. Atlanta deserved my loyalty. Success eventually changed my bank account. It never changed my priorities. Family always came first. And no one understood that better than my wife. At least, that's what I believed. I met Shanice Tyrone 9 years earlier. during a charity gala supporting engineering scholarships for underprivileged students. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't interested in discussing contracts or company valuations. She asked me about my favorite childhood memory. I told her about building a tiny wooden bridge in my mother's backyard, using scrap lumber and rusty nails. She laughed. Not because the story was funny, because she said she could picture a little boy treating two pieces of wood like they were the Golden Gate Bridge. She had a warm smile that made ordinary conversations feel effortless. 3 years later, we married. For a long time, life felt balanced. Shanice had impeccable taste. She loved beautiful homes, elegant vacations, luxury restaurants, designer clothing. None of that bothered me. I could afford it. More importantly, I enjoyed making her happy. She often joked that I worked too much. Sometimes she was right. Whenever I became consumed by deadlines or government contracts, she reminded me to slow down. We traveled, hosted dinner parties, supported charities. From the outside, people probably assumed we had the perfect marriage. Reality is rarely that simple. Over the past 2 years, something subtle had changed. Shanice gradually stopped seeing my success as something we shared. Instead, she began treating it as something she could direct. Small disagreements slowly became tests. If I postponed dinner because of an emergency bridge inspection, she'd remind me for days. If I cancelled vacation plans because a client needed me, she'd say work mattered more than she did. At first, I apologized. Then I compromised. Eventually, I noticed something unsettling. Every compromise simply created another expectation. Still, nothing prepared me for the phone call that arrived 3 weeks ago. I was standing inside our headquarters reviewing structural reports when my personal phone rang. The number belonged to St. Mary's Medical Center. The doctor spoke gently, but no amount of kindness could soften his words. My mother had passed away peacefully that morning after complications from a sudden illness. For several seconds, the world became completely silent. Everything around me disappeared. The reports, the conference room, the voices outside my office. None of it existed anymore. The woman who had carried every dream I ever had was gone. Her funeral was scheduled for the following weekend. I promised myself there was only one thing left I could still do for her. Be there. One final time. The days leading up to my mother's funeral passed in a strange blur. Grief has a way of distorting time. Some mornings felt endless. Other days disappeared before I even realized the sun had set. Work became my refuge. Instead of sitting alone with my thoughts, I buried myself inside conference rooms, engineering reports, and project updates. My executive team understood without asking questions. Whenever someone entered my office, conversations became shorter. Voices became softer. Nobody expected the same version of Malik Tyrone they had known only a week earlier. Even our biggest municipal project, a $200 million smart highway modernization initiative connecting several major Atlanta suburbs, temporarily lost its importance. For the first time in 15 years, I delegated nearly everything. Contracts, board meetings, investor presentations, site inspections. Every executive offered to postpone business until after the funeral. I appreciated the gesture, but my mother had always taught me something. Life doesn't stop because your heart hurts. So neither would I. 3 days before the funeral, I personally confirmed every travel arrangement. First-class seat, direct morning flight, airport transfer, hotel reservation near the church, rental vehicle. Everything looked perfect. I printed physical copies of every confirmation, even though everything was stored digitally. Old habits. Engineers trust backups. That evening I found myself sitting alone in my mother's favorite chair inside her old house. The funeral home had already collected most of the photographs for the memorial display. Only one picture remained on the coffee table. It showed me at 12 years old holding a homemade wooden bridge built for my middle school science fair. Mum stood beside me with one hand resting proudly on my shoulder. I smiled without realizing it. Then cried all over again. She had kept that photograph for nearly 3 decades. Behind it, folded carefully into the frame, was a handwritten note. Her handwriting hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Don't measure your success by the buildings you create. Measure it by the people who feel safer because you built them. I folded the note and placed it inside my wallet. It would travel with me everywhere from that day forward. When I returned home later that night, Shanice was waiting in the kitchen. She had cooked dinner herself. That immediately caught my attention. Normally, whenever we wanted something special, she preferred ordering from one of Atlanta's upscale restaurants. Tonight, she had prepared baked salmon, roasted vegetables, and rice, exactly the way my mother used to make it. "I thought you could use a real meal," she said softly. For the first time in several days, I smiled. "Thank you." Dinner remained peaceful. She asked about the funeral arrangements, the pastor, the family expected to attend. Even my cousins traveling from North Carolina. Everything felt normal again. Until she casually mentioned her plans for the upcoming weekend. "Oh," she said, while pouring another glass of water. "I almost forgot. Lena finally confirmed the reservation." I looked up. "What reservation?" "The lake resort." I frowned. "The girls' weekend?" She nodded. "No. Our weekend." I stared at her. "Shanice." She leaned forward. "I've been planning this for nearly 4 months. It's only one weekend. My mother's funeral is that weekend." "I know." She answered so calmly that for a moment I wondered whether she understood what she had just said. "I already told Lena we'd be there." "I can't." "You can." I slowly placed my fork on the table. "My mother is being buried on Saturday morning. We're driving to Lake Oconee on Friday." "I won't be there." Her expression hardened. "So you're choosing them?" I blinked. "Them? Your family? My mother? They're the same thing." "No, they aren't. My mother died." Silence settled between us. Finally, she sighed. "You've spent every waking minute thinking about this funeral. Because it's my mother's funeral. You've cancelled dinners. You've postponed trips. You barely even notice I'm here anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My entire life doesn't stop because someone dies. "It isn't just someone. It's my mother." Shanice folded her arms. "She's gone, Malik. The funeral won't change that." I stared at her in disbelief, then answered as calmly as I could. "It won't change that she's gone, but it'll change whether I honored her." She rolled her eyes slightly. "I honestly don't understand why people make funerals such a huge deal. They're for the living." "Exactly. And I'm still alive. So are you. And I need my husband. I'll be back Sunday." "Too late." I took a slow breath. "Shanice." "There will never be another chance to attend my mother's funeral. There will always be another weekend getaway." She looked away toward the kitchen window, then quietly said something that stayed with me long afterward. "You always make everyone else's needs more important than mine." I shook my head. "That's not true. It feels true. I've spent years building a life for us. I know. Everything we have, our home, our vacations, our security, I built those because I love you. I never asked for all this." "No, you expected it." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and carried both dinner plates to the sink. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Only running water filled the room. Eventually, she turned around. Her voice had changed. It sounded softer, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things." I walked toward her. "I know this week has been difficult. For both of us." She nodded. "I don't want us fighting before you leave." "Neither do I." She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm being selfish. I just miss you." I kissed her forehead. "I'll only be gone 2 days." "I know." She smiled faintly. "I'll even help you pack tomorrow." The tension that had filled the kitchen seemed to disappear. The next evening, she did exactly that. She folded my suits carefully, packed my dress shoes, placed my mother's handwritten note safely inside the inside pocket of my garment bag after seeing it on my desk. She reminded me to bring an extra phone charger. She even checked the weather forecast for the city where the funeral would take place. Everything about her behavior suggested the disagreement was over. Later, while I reviewed emails in my home office, she walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I was thinking," she said. I could drive you to the airport Friday morning. You don't have to wake up that early. I want to. It'll give us a little more time together before you leave. I smiled. I'd like that. She smiled back, then squeezed my hand. Text me the moment you land. I promise. That night, for the first time since my mother's passing, I slept peacefully. Before going to bed, I set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning. My suit was hanging by the bedroom door. My luggage stood neatly beside it. My passport and wallet rested on the dresser. Everything was ready. As I turned off the bedside lamp, Shanice leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Safe travels tomorrow," she whispered. I closed my eyes, believing the worst was finally behind us. The alarm sounded at exactly 4:30. For a brief moment, I forgot why I had set it so early. Then reality settled back onto my shoulders. Today was my mother's funeral. I sat on the edge of the bed in silence before standing. The house was still dark. Outside, Atlanta slept beneath a light summer mist. I showered, shaved, and put on the charcoal suit my mother had once told me made me look like a man who keeps his promises. I smiled sadly at the memory. When I stepped into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. Shanice was already awake. She wore grey sweatpants and one of my oversized sweatshirts. "I figured you'd need this," she said, sliding a steaming mug toward me. "Thank you." For several minutes we sat together without speaking. She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. "I'm really sorry we argued." "I know. I wasn't thinking clearly." "I know. I hope you can forgive me." I looked into her eyes. "There isn't anything to forgive." She smiled. "I'm glad." She stood and walked around the island before wrapping her arms around me. "I'll miss you. I'll only be gone 2 days." "I know." She kissed my cheek. "Call me after the service." "I will." Nothing about her behavior seemed unusual. Nothing. If someone had walked into our kitchen that morning, they would have seen a loving wife saying goodbye to her husband before an emotional trip. Even I believed it. At 5:30, she insisted on carrying my garment bag to the garage. "I've got it," I said. "I know, but let me help." She placed the bag inside my SUV herself. Then she closed the rear hatch. "Drive safely." "I always do." She smiled again. "I'll be waiting when you get home." Those were the last words she said before I drove away. Atlanta's streets were nearly empty before sunrise. The familiar skyline slowly appeared as the first orange light crept across the horizon. Traffic was unusually light. For once, I wasn't thinking about contracts, bridge inspections, or city projects. My thoughts stayed with my mother. I remembered riding the MARTA train with her when I was 8. She used to point at bridges and overpasses through the window. Someone built every one of those. One day, that someone became me. I whispered quietly to myself. "I made it, Mom. I just wish you could have seen a little more of it." 40 minutes later, I pulled into the airport parking garage. Travelers hurried toward the terminal with rolling luggage. Business executives, families, college students. Everything felt ordinary. I grabbed my suitcase, straightened my tie, and walked inside. Large departure screens glowed above the terminal. My flight still appeared on schedule. On time. Gate B24. Departure, 8:05 a.m. I breathed a little easier. There was plenty of time. After passing through security, I stopped briefly to buy a bottle of water, then headed toward the airline check-in counter to print a fresh baggage receipt. Only 2 people stood ahead of me. The employee greeted the first passenger, typed quickly, printed boarding passes. The line moved smoothly. Soon it was my turn. "Good morning," the airline representative said pleasantly. "Good morning. May I see your identification?" I handed over my driver's license. She smiled politely. "Thank you, Mr. Tyrone." Her fingers moved across the keyboard. One monitor, then another. Her smile slowly faded. She frowned slightly, then typed again. Another screen opened. She leaned closer. "I'm sorry." She paused. "Could you repeat your last name?" "Tyrone." She entered it once more. Nothing. She refreshed the reservation system. Still nothing. "I'm sorry for the delay." "No problem." She continued searching. Nearly 30 seconds passed. Then she looked up. Are you Malik Tyrone? Yes. I'm afraid. She hesitated. I can't find an active reservation under your name. I blinked. There must be a mistake. I booked this flight weeks ago. I understand. She searched again. I have the confirmation email. I unlocked my phone and opened it immediately. There it was. Flight confirmation. Seat 2A. Departure time. Everything. I showed her the email. She compared the confirmation number with the system. Her expression changed instantly. Oh. She quietly excused herself and called over a supervisor. The supervisor examined the screen, then looked at me with visible sympathy. Mr. Tyrone, your reservation existed. My stomach tightened. What do you mean, existed? It was cancelled. I stared at him. Cancelled? He nodded slowly. Late last night. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Cancelled by who? He clicked through several account records, then stopped. His expression became even more uncomfortable. It appears the cancellation came through your online customer account. That's impossible. I never cancelled it. I understand. He turned the monitor slightly. The account login was successful. The cancellation was confirmed. The travel credit has already been accepted. My mind raced. I immediately opened my airline app. My reservation was gone. Completely gone. Instead, a notification appeared. Trip cancelled. My hands suddenly felt cold. There has to be another seat. I'm sorry. The flight is completely full. What about first class? Full. Business? Full. Standby. We already have 23 standby passengers. My breathing became heavier. What about another airline? The supervisor immediately began searching. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. A full minute. He shook his head. We're checking every airport within driving distance. Charlotte, Birmingham, Nashville, Jacksonville. Nothing. Every itinerary would arrive hours after the funeral ended. I slowly lowered my head. This can't be happening. The supervisor spoke softly. I'm truly sorry. Then my phone vibrated. An email. Travel credit issued successfully. Issued to the account holder. I opened the account details. The registered recovery email wasn't mine. It belonged to Shanice Tyrone. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I simply stared at the screen. Then I pressed her contact. She answered on the second ring. Hey, babe. Her voice sounded relaxed, almost cheerful. Shanice, did your flight board already? I swallowed hard. My ticket was cancelled. Silence. Not surprised silence. Knowing silence. Finally, she spoke. Yes. You did it? Another pause. I cancelled it. I closed my eyes. Why? Her answer came without hesitation. Because I wanted to teach you a lesson. I didn't answer her. Not immediately. The noise of the airport faded into the background until all I could hear was my own breathing. Finally, I asked one question. Was missing my mother's funeral worth it? Her tone remained calm. I wasn't trying to keep you from your mother forever. You've already buried her in your heart. I just wanted you to understand that our marriage has to come first. I closed my eyes. There will never be another funeral. She sighed impatiently. You'll get over it. That sentence ended something inside me. Not my love. That had already been wounded. My trust. Completely. Without another word, I ended the call. An airline employee gently placed a bottle of water in front of me. I'm so sorry, sir. I nodded. Thank you. An hour later, I sat alone in a quiet airport lounge, watching my mother's funeral through a live stream on my phone. I watched my cousins carry her casket. I watched my uncle struggle to finish the eulogy because he kept breaking down. I watched family members place white roses on the casket one by one. There should have been one more rose. Mine. Instead, I was hundreds of miles away, sitting beneath fluorescent airport lights with a boarding pass that no longer existed. When the pastor said, if anyone would like to offer a final goodbye, I instinctively stood from my chair. Then reality hit me. I wasn't there. I slowly sat back down. Tears rolled silently down my face. By the time the live stream ended, I understood something with absolute clarity. Some mistakes can be forgiven. Some betrayals cannot. I drove home that evening without turning on the radio. The house looked exactly as I had left it that morning. Warm lights glowed through the windows. Everything appeared normal. Inside, Shanice was sitting on the sofa watching television. She smiled when she saw me. "I figured you'd come back tonight." I simply looked at her. She frowned. "Are you going to say something?" "No." "Malik." "No." I walked upstairs, packed a small overnight bag, then moved into the guest suite. She followed me. "You're really going to act like this?" I zipped the bag closed. "I'm grieving." "So am I." I finally turned toward her. "No, you aren't." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That was the last conversation we had for several days. The following Monday, I arrived at the headquarters of Tyrone Infrastructure Solutions before sunrise. My executive assistant noticed the exhaustion on my face. "Good morning, Mr. Tyrone." "Good morning." "I've cleared your schedule like you requested." "Thank you." Instead of walking into the boardroom, I walked into the office of our general counsel. Waiting inside were our corporate attorney, my estate attorney, a certified public accountant, a financial planner, and the attorney who had drafted our prenuptial agreement years earlier. No one smiled. They all knew why I was there. I took my seat, opened a folder, placed my wedding ring on top of it, then spoke 6 calm words. "It's time to separate everything." For the next 4 hours, every document was reviewed, every ownership record, every account, every agreement. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden, simply the legal reality of what belonged to whom. The Atlanta house had always remained my separate property under the prenuptial agreement because I had purchased it before our marriage. The luxury SUV Shanice drove was leased through the company. Her premium credit cards were corporate expense cards authorized solely at my discretion. The country club membership, the concierge travel program, the luxury shopping accounts, the household staff, even the private wine club she loved. Every one of them existed because I had chosen to provide them, not because they were permanent entitlements. I gave only one instruction: handle everything professionally. No humiliation. No surprises beyond what the law requires. The attorneys nodded. Over the next week, changes happened quietly. The company vehicle was scheduled for return. Corporate cards stopped approving purchases. The household manager informed Shanice that her employment assignment had ended. The travel concierge politely explained that the membership had been cancelled. The country club confirmed her privileges had expired. Each phone call confused her a little more. She assumed there had been banking errors, then computer glitches, then accounting mistakes. Finally, she stormed into my office. "Malik!" Employees looked up as she entered. I calmly asked my assistant to close the door. She threw a stack of declined credit card receipts onto my desk. "What is this?" I looked at them briefly. Cancelled accounts. My car. Company lease. My memberships. Company benefits. My shopping account. Closed. She stared at me. "You did this?" "Yes." Her voice rose. "Why?" I stood slowly, walked to the window overlooking downtown Atlanta. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I turned around. My mother waited her entire life to see the man I became. I paused. She deserved one final goodbye. Shanice lowered her eyes. "I told you." I raised one hand. "No. You told me you wanted to teach me a lesson." Silence. "I learned it." She whispered my name. "Malik." I looked directly into her eyes. My lesson was that the person I trusted most believed control mattered more than compassion. Another long silence filled the office. Then I said the words she would remember for the rest of her life. "You cancelled my last chance to say goodbye to my mother." I let the sentence settle. "So I cancelled the lifestyle you believed was guaranteed." The color drained from her face. for the first time since I had known her. She had no response, no argument, no explanation. She simply stood there, frozen, realizing that one selfish decision had cost her far more than luxury. It had destroyed the foundation of our marriage. 3 months later, our divorce was finalized respectfully and according to the law. I kept no bitterness, only boundaries. 6 months after that, I established the Grace Tyrone Memorial Foundation, named after my mother. The foundation pays for emergency travel for people who cannot afford to attend the funerals of close family members or reach loved ones receiving end-of-life care. At the dedication ceremony, I stood before hundreds of guests and looked at the plaque bearing my mother's name. Then I said quietly, "My mother taught me that love is measured by showing up when people need you most. I couldn't show up for her. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure someone else never loses that chance." This story reminds us that grief deserves compassion, not control. When someone is mourning the loss of a loved one, empathy should always come before personal pride or convenience. Healthy marriages are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and support during life's hardest moments, not on punishment or manipulation. Respect boundaries and major life events. Funerals, medical emergencies, and family crises should never be used as leverage in a relationship. Communication is healthier than control. Trying to teach someone a lesson through deception often causes lasting damage that cannot be undone. Understand financial and legal responsibilities. Couples should know which assets are jointly owned, which are individually owned, and how prenuptial agreements, trusts, and business property work. Financial transparency can prevent misunderstandings and conflict. Think before acting in anger. A decision made in a moment of frustration can permanently damage trust and relationships. Respond with wisdom, not revenge. When serious betrayals occur, seeking legal advice, protecting your rights, and making thoughtful decisions is far more constructive than acting impulsively. Honor the people who shaped your life. Cherishing loved ones while they are alive and honoring them after they pass is an important part of healing and preserving family legacy. Ultimately, the story encourages viewers to value compassion over control, accountability over excuses, and thoughtful decision-making over emotional reactions. It serves as a reminder that trust is one of the most valuable parts of any relationship, and once broken, it can be extraordinarily difficult to rebuild.